Hi, this is Tom, and in this episode we're going to factor what are called differences of squares. And before we jump right into that, let me show you a few things that you need to see. In order to factor x squared minus 25 using the process that we have, what you have to do is think about this. For example, if I give you the problem of 0 plus 3, you would say, very simply, you'd say, well, that's 3. The 0 doesn't change anything, and so we don't even write it. If I was to take something like 3x and I was to subtract 0, I'm still at 3x. And if I was to take, let's try another one. Let's try 3x. Actually, let's try this one. Let's make it a little harder here. Let's try something like 5x minus 5x. Well, that would be 0. What about something like this then? Now, what if I had a problem like x squared plus 5x minus, oops, I'm sorry, let me go back. This 0, really that's 0x, but 0 times x we know is just 0. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, what if I was to write something like this? X squared plus 5x minus 5x minus 25. Well, what we would do is we would say, why bother with this? Because we know that 5x minus 5x is just 0. And so we'd say, well, that's just x squared plus 0x minus 25. But we know that 0x is very simply x squared plus 0 minus 25. And in other words, really, 0 minus 25, well, that's just minus 25. So you might say, well, that was a lot of work. It's not the work, it's the idea. And the idea is very simply that when there's a 0 in the problem, just like the 0 is implied. Just like the 1 in front of an x is implied, so we don't write it, the 0 between terms is implied, so we don't have to write it. So that's the key to unraveling this problem. So now, let's return to the original problem, which says factor x squared minus 25. All right, let's bring this down here. And the problem is going to work just as we might expect. We're going to start with an x, and I'm going to write x squared minus 25. But I'm going to do two things here. In front of the x squared, we're going to write the 1, because we know that that's what's implied, but we don't write it. And we have an x squared term. Normally, to figure out what goes in the bottom here, we have something in front of an x. Well, in this case, what do we have in front of the x? We have a 0 in front of the x. So it's not written. So I write plus 0x minus 25. And now, once you realize that, then playing the game can proceed. So in the top spot, I take the 1 and the negative 25. So here I have 1 times negative 25 to get minus 25. In the bottom spot, in the bottom position, we have the 0. And then, if we solve the problem, let's see, we need two numbers that multiply to negative 25, and then they add to 0. And the answers are plus 5, minus 5. This is the key. And then just like in previous videos, what we do is we rewrite the 0x using the plus 5 and the minus 5. So I write 1x squared plus 5x minus 5x, because remember, plus 5x and minus 5x here is the same as the 0x here, minus 25. And then we factor by grouping. So we get our first group here. I have a common factor is x. In my second group, I'm going to try a common factor. Let's try minus 5. Okay, so that's going to give me an x. X plus 5 in the first group. And since I'm taking out a whole negative 5, I'm going to put all of that here. And likewise, if that was a positive 5, you would write plus 5. Then you'd have an x. Now when you take a negative 5 from a negative 25, you're left with a positive 5. Now we have a greatest common factor of x plus 5. And so I can write my final answer as x plus 5 times x minus 5. This problem is this pattern is called a difference of squares. And if you don't see the pattern, all you have to do is go through the game. And if you do see the pattern, then notice that the pattern is often written as x squared minus some number a squared. And then you always know that it factors into x plus a. X minus a. So for example, if I was to give you something like x squared minus 49, well, you'd have to know your squares, but you could say, well, there's my first square, the x squared, but wait, 49 is the same as 7 squared. So I can write that as x plus 7, x minus 7. So play around with that a little bit. Remember, if you don't see the pattern initially, you can always solve it by playing the game and factoring by grouping. This is Tom, and thanks for watching.